Welcome all to this, the 21st in my series of weekly presentations. This week I'd like to take you through the restoration of quite a nice, unique ATO French battery electric clock from circa 1930. Now that you've read about the man and his companies and can appreciate the broad spectrum of products that he worked with and sold, let's now get back to the clock that he created and ended up marketing in competition with Boule, the other market leader in battery electric clocks. And here's this beautiful little clock in a Bakelite case with an Art Deco dial and silvered components on the casework. A modern battery holder has been added on to the rear to replace the original, since the old batteries are no longer available. You can also see some of the problems I'm likely to encounter in that the entire movement is covered with verdigris. There's a hint there that perhaps there's been a battery leakage in the past. In the left-hand picture here, there's something a little strange about this case. It seems to be distorted. Is it intentional or not? And yet the feet do not sit flat on the ground. I'll be trying to find out what's going on there a little further on. Inside the back cover are the original instructions on how to set up the clock and have it operating correctly, because this clock would have been something new. Nothing like this had been available before. A clock with a battery and a pendulum movement. This must have really been a challenge for marketing people to convince customers that this would be a clock that they should have. As I dismantled the clock, problems begin to emerge. On the left we can see that there is corrosion on the silver work on the dial and the reflector ring, and on the right hand side here the verdigris is now apparent right through the entire mechanism. I have no doubts now that sometime in the recent past a battery has leaked. When batteries leak, they don't just exude liquids, they also gas out, and those gases are acidic. And here you can see the extent of the attack on all the brass and the rusting of any steel components. It's going to be a job and a half to bring this back to good operating condition. It's interesting to note here that some components have not been attacked as bad. For instance, the tin plate contacts on the left hand side, and on the right the pendulum rod must be made from something like nickel or something non-magnetic like aluminium. Also notice that the bar magnet coated with black enamel has not suffered. At least that's some good thing, because the rest is pretty sad. And at this point the truth finally comes out. The movement is locked solid with verdigris and rust. The escapement on the right hand side here is totally rusted solid. Nothing is free to move at all. It's going to need care and patience to get this thing back to operating condition. This is the escapement section of the clock, a critical component of the clock, which is totally rusted. And as you can see, contacts and any of the components which should be free to rotate are in poor condition. Bingo! Nothing like a good swim in dilute hydrochloric acid to remove verdigris and rust. Here it is. Hours of work for every component to be treated, neutralized, cleaned, polished, and in any case requiring it, lacquering to prevent further deterioration. Complete strip down to the basic component of the escapement and the movement, so that all the components could be cleaned and all rust and verdigris removed, and then finally reassembled. Everything is free to operate, and all electrical contacts are now sound. The battery holder has been refitted, and now the circuit wiring has been completed, as shown on the right. The clock should be ready to run. When I first received this clock and removed the back cover, the smell coming out of the case was just like salt and vinegar chips or corrosion from around a lead acid battery in a car, and that immediately warned me of possible battery damage to the movement. When I searched on the internet, I found an almost identical clock, and you can see on the left here that the Bakelite case is completely square corners and flat sides. And I'm convinced now that when I pull this clock to pieces, the Bakelite case still retained that extremely strong smell. After washing it repeatedly in hydrochloric acid, the smell did not disappear. And I'm sure that over time, the fumes from the leaking battery have permeated into the Bakelite and caused it to distort and bubble. And hence we now have a curvaceous case rather than a symmetrical, square, rigid design. It's not unacceptable. To finish off the exterior, the feet were stripped back to their base brass and re-silvered. The bezel around the dial was also stripped back to its brass and re-silvered. The dial and the reflector rim were cleaned up physically and given a coat of clear lacquer. And ultimately, the little clock now looks really nice, despite its change in proportions and shape and size, and the mechanical components and the electrical components are all operating correctly and reliably. A really nice little clock, of which I found several in the internet for sale or have sold at more than $2,000 a piece. Thanks for being part of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. This is quite a unique little clock, and it's probably only the second ATO clock that I've ever restored. Bit of a challenge, but the result was very gratifying, and I hope you agree. If you have any questions or comments to make about this presentation or the contents, just send me an email to the address shown at the bottom of this page. Thank you, and bye for now.